A decorated black female veteran just wanted a quiet breakfast. But when two cops decided she didn't belong, they had no idea they were targeting a quiet titan who helped write the very rules they were about to break. Part 1, The Quiet Prologue. The sun hadn't yet broken through the morning haze over Baltimore's inner harbor, casting the water in a muted, pearlescent gray. It was 6:45 a.m., that magical hour when the city stretches and yawns before the day's chaos descends. Nestled on a corner overlooking the water, the Harborview Diner was an island of warmth and light. Its neon sign, a cheerful blue seagull, flickered against the brick facade, a beacon for early risers and dock workers. Inside, the air was thick with the holy trinity of morning aromas, dark roast coffee, sizzling bacon, and a faint, sweet whisper of pancake batter. The low hum of conversation mingled with the clatter of ceramic on formica and the distant, mournful call of a foghorn from a departing ship. Jada Washington sat in her usual booth, the one tucked into the back corner. From this vantage point, she had a clear view of the entrance and the entire dining floor, her back protected by the worn, dark red leatherette of the booth. It was a habit etched into her bones, a piece of a former life she no longer had to live but couldn't completely shed. At 45, her presence was one of profound stillness. Her short, natural hair was flecked with a few distinguished strands of silver at the temples. Her eyes, a deep, intelligent brown, missed nothing. They scanned the room not with anxiety, but with a calm, assessing patience that was far more unnerving. She wore a simple gray long-sleeved shirt and a black Gore-Tex jacket, functional and unassuming, its clean lines a stark contrast to the slightly frayed cuffs. She had already performed her quiet ritual. After sliding into the booth, she'd taken a paper napkin from the dispenser and meticulously wiped down the silverware, the salt and pepper shakers, and the edge of the table, arranging everything in a precise, geometric layout. It wasn't about germs. It was about control, about establishing order in a small, manageable space. Chloe, the young waitress, approached with a coffee pot already in hand. She was a sociology student at Johns Hopkins, her bright, curious eyes always taking in the diner's ecosystem. "Morning, Jada," she said, her smile genuine. "The usual?" Jada looked up, her expression softening almost imperceptibly. "Morning, Chloe. Please." Chloe filled the thick ceramic mug, the dark liquid steaming in the cool morning air. "Maria's trying a new spice blend in the home fries today. A little paprika, a little cayenne. Said to tell you she thinks you'll like the kick." A ghost of a smile touched Jada's lips. "Tell her I appreciate the heads up." From behind the counter, Maria, the diner's owner, watched them. She was a formidable Greek-American woman in her late 50s, with a fiery spirit and a heart as big as the harbor itself. Her brother had done 2 tours in the army, and she recognized the quiet weight that veterans carried. She never pried into Jada's past, but she saw the way Jada's shoulders, even in repose, seemed braced for a burden. She saw the discipline, the respect, the way she was the only customer who always stacked her plates neatly when she was finished. In the unspoken language of those who understand service, a bond had formed. Maria's protection over Jada was fierce and absolute. Jada sipped her coffee, black and strong, and gazed out the window. For a moment, the reflection of the diner's interior dissolved, and the gray water outside reminded her of the dust-choked landscape of a different continent, the pre-dawn light before a mission. She could almost feel the familiar weight of body armor, hear the crackle of a radio in her ear. A shiver, barely there, ran down her spine. She blinked, deliberately, bringing the cozy diner back into focus. The clink of a fork against a plate. The low murmur of a couple in the next booth arguing playfully over the last piece of toast. "You are here," she told herself, a mantra she'd used for years. "You are in Baltimore. You are safe. You are just having breakfast." She had earned this peace. She had traded a world of high stakes and hidden dangers for the simple, predictable rhythm of this diner, for the anonymity of being just another face in the morning crowd. She didn't need accolades or recognition. She just needed this small corner of the world to be exactly what it was, ordinary. A place where her past was her own, and her present was a cup of coffee, a plate of hash browns, and the quiet promise of a normal day. She was invisible here, and invisibility, she knew, was a form of freedom. Part 2, The Eruption of Conflict. The peace was shattered at 7:10 a.m. The bell above the diner's door didn't jingle, it slammed against the wood frame as two uniformed police officers pushed their way inside. They moved with a proprietary swagger that instantly changed the room's atmospheric pressure. The low hum of conversation faltered and dipped. The lead officer was tall and thick-set, his neck straining against the collar of his uniform. His name tag read Miller. A pair of reflective sunglasses masked his eyes, even in the dim interior, and his jaw was set in a perpetual, arrogant clench. He surveyed the room like a predator scanning a field for weakness. His partner, Carter, was younger, leaner, and trailed a half-step behind. He held a digital notepad and looked deeply uncomfortable, his eyes darting around, avoiding contact with the patrons. Chloe, caught halfway to a table, offered a tentative, professional smile. "Good morning, officers. Table for two." Officer Miller ignored her completely. His gaze swept past the families, past the dock workers, and landed, with laser-like precision, on Jada. It was as if a spotlight had been switched on, singling her out in her quiet corner. He started toward her, his boots making heavy, deliberate thuds on the linoleum floor. "Ma'am," he began, his voice a low growl that carried across the diner. He stopped at her table, looming over her. "Are you a paying customer here?" Jada looked up from her coffee, her expression unreadable. She took a slow, deliberate sip before answering, her calm a stark contrast to his aggression. "I am." Miller leaned forward, placing his palms flat on her table, invading her space. "You've ordered something." "I was about to," Jada replied, her voice even and low. She didn't raise it, didn't betray a hint of fear or anger. She simply stated a fact. Carter, his partner, belatedly stepped forward, tapping his stylus on his notepad. "Do you have a receipt for any prior purchase?" Before Jada could respond, Chloe rushed over, her face flushed with indignation. "I just served her coffee, sir. She's a regular." She was about to order breakfast. Miller didn't even honor Chloe with a glance. "Was I speaking to you?" he snapped, the venom in his tone making the young waitress flinch back as if struck. The swinging door to the kitchen flew open, and Maria emerged, wiping her hands on her apron, her eyes blazing. "That woman is here every single morning, officer. She pays her tab, in cash, every single time. What seems to be the problem?" Finally, Miller turned his head, acknowledging Maria but not her authority. "We received a call," he said flatly, his voice devoid of any detail. "A report of a suspicious individual loitering on the premises. Description matches this lady." His thumb jabbed in Jada's direction. "Suspicious?" Maria's voice rose, incredulous. "She's sitting here, drinking coffee. Who called? Who reported this suspicious activity?" Miller's jaw tightened. He ignored the question and turned his full attention back to Jada. His voice dropped, taking on a menacing, confidential tone. "I'm going to need to see some identification." Jada held his gaze for a long moment. The diner had fallen completely silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the frantic beating of Chloe's heart. Jada didn't sigh. She didn't protest. She simply reached into the inner pocket of her jacket and produced a slim, minimalist wallet. She slid out her Maryland driver's license and placed it on the table. Miller picked it up, glanced at it, and sneered. "Jada Washington. This all you got?" "It's all that's required," Jada stated. The subtle challenge in her tone, the quiet defiance, seemed to ignite a fuse in Miller. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to step outside with us. We need to ask you a few questions." "You can ask them right here," Jada replied, her voice still perfectly level. "I'm not creating a disturbance. You fit the description of a vagrant we've had complaints about," Miller lied, his voice getting louder, playing to the room. "I am not a vagrant," Jada said, the words clear and precise. "I am a resident of this city. I am a veteran of the United States Army. And I am a customer in this establishment, attempting to have breakfast." Miller let out a short, derisive laugh. "A veteran, huh? That's what they all say." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Now, I'm not asking you anymore. I'm telling you. Stand up. You're coming outside with us. Now." His hand drifted down, hovering menacingly over the handle of his service weapon. The air grew thick, charged with the electric potential of violence. Maria took a step forward, ready to physically place herself between them. Chloe's hand was shaking so badly she had to grip the counter to steady herself. Jada watched him, her eyes as calm and deep as the harbor water outside. She didn't move. She didn't argue. Instead, she reached into her other pocket and pulled out a simple, battered-looking smartphone. It was an older model, its casing plain black, with no logo or identifying marks. It looked like a relic. With a single, fluid motion of her thumb, she swiped the screen on and pressed a small, nondescript gray icon in the corner of the home screen. The icon briefly flashed red and then returned to gray. She didn't hold the phone to her ear. She didn't speak a word. She simply placed the phone face up on the table, next to her untouched cup of coffee. The screen went dark. The action was so quiet, so anticlimactic, yet it landed in the diner with the force of a thunderclap. Part 3, The Silent Resistance. For a full 10 seconds, nobody moved. The sizzle of bacon on the grill seemed unnaturally loud in the dead silence. Officer Miller stared at the blank phone, then at Jada's impassive face, a flicker of confusion warring with his anger. The simplicity of the act had completely derailed his script. He had expected fear, shouting, or compliance. He had not expected this quiet, incomprehensible gesture. "What was that?" Miller demanded, his voice a little too loud, betraying his unease. "Who did you just call?" "Your lawyer." He laughed, but the sound was brittle. "Good luck with that." Jada didn't answer. She simply folded her hands on the table, her gaze locked on him. Her silence was not submissive, it was absolute. It was a wall he could not breach, a language he did not understand. It radiated a certainty that he found deeply unsettling. That certainty began to ripple outward. Across the room, a large man in a dusty Carhartt jacket and work boots, who had been hunched over a plate of eggs, slowly straightened up. He didn't say a word, but he turned in his booth to face them squarely. He laid his fork down with a deliberate clink. His eyes, hard and clear, were fixed on Officer Miller. A moment later, a woman in her 60s, a retired teacher with her school district ID still clipped to her cardigan, pushed her glasses up her nose and stood up. Her voice was quiet but carried the unmistakable authority of a lifetime in the classroom. "Officer," she said, her tone level. "This woman has done nothing wrong. We are all witnesses to that." Miller's head snapped toward her. "Ma'am, this is official police business. I suggest you sit down and mind your own." But the spell was broken. His authority, already cracked by Jada's composure, was now splintering. Near the door, a young black man in a FedEx uniform, who had been waiting for a to-go order, set his package down. He crossed his arms over his chest and leaned against the wall, his expression a mask of cold fury. He pulled out his phone, and the small red light of a recording camera blinked on. Then another phone came out. And another. The couple in the booth next to Jada, who had been trying to make themselves invisible, now held their devices up, angled to capture the scene. Within a minute, at least 5 cameras were silently documenting Miller's every move. The diner had transformed from a collection of individuals into a unified, silent jury. They were no longer just patrons, they were guardians. Chloe, watching from behind the counter, felt a surge of adrenaline replace her fear. She looked at Jada, sitting in the eye of the storm she had created, a pillar of unshakable calm. It was one of the bravest things Chloe had ever seen. Jada wasn't fighting back with fists or words, she was fighting back with dignity, and in doing so, she had armed everyone else in the room with the same weapon. The shift in power was palpable. It was a physical presence in the air. Miller could feel it. The weight of all those eyes, all those silent lenses, pressed down on him. He glanced at his partner, looking for support, but what he saw only fueled his frustration. Officer Carter was sweating. His gaze was fixed on the floor, his face pale. He kept swallowing, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. He recognized this scene. He'd seen the training videos. This was how things went viral. This was how careers ended. He looked from the defiant patrons to Jada's serene face and then back to his partner's flushed, angry one. For the first time, Carter wasn't just following orders, he was questioning them, and the conflict was written all over his face. That's it. Obstruction. Miller barked, desperate to regain control. He took a threatening step toward the teacher. You're all obstructing a police investigation. But his threat was hollow. The silent resistance held its ground. No one moved. No one spoke. The message was clear, we are all together. If you come for one of us, you come for all of us. Jada finally spoke, her voice cutting through the tension. It was still low, still calm, but it held a new edge of command. Officer Miller, she said. I would advise you to stand down. You have made a serious miscalculation. Her words, and the quiet power behind them, hung in the air, a final, chilling warning. Part 4, The Reversal of Power. Just as Miller opened his mouth to retort, his face flushed with rage, the diner door swung open again, this time with a sharp, decisive crack. The man who entered was the antithesis of the scene he had walked into. He was in his late 40s, with a slim, athletic build, dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, a crisp white shirt, and a simple, dark blue tie. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. His salt and pepper hair was neatly cut, and his eyes, behind a pair of wire-rimmed glasses, were sharp and analytical. He moved with an economy of motion and an aura of absolute, unshakable authority. He didn't pause at the door to survey the scene. He seemed to absorb it all in a single, sweeping glance as he strode forward. His voice, when he spoke, was not loud, but it sliced through the tension like a surgeon's scalpel. Officers Miller and Carter. Do not move. Do not speak. Miller and Carter froze, their heads whipping around to face the newcomer. Miller's blustering rage evaporated, replaced by a stunned, defensive confusion. Who the hell are you? Miller stammered. The man in the suit didn't break stride. He reached into his jacket and produced a small, black leather case, flipping it open to reveal a gold badge and an identification card. He didn't flash it theatrically, he simply held it up for them to see as he continued to advance. Elias Vance. Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division, he announced, his tone flat and official. He stopped directly beside Jada's table, his presence creating an invisible barrier between her and the two officers. And this diner, as of approximately 90 seconds ago, became the site of a federal inquiry. Miller's face went from red to pale. DOJ. This is a local matter. You have no jurisdiction here. Vance gave a small, cold smile. Jurisdiction is an interesting concept, Officer Miller. It became my jurisdiction the moment a priority alert was triggered from a federally registered device. An alert, I might add, that is reserved for former senior federal investigators in imminent physical danger. It also became my jurisdiction when you, on a publicly accessible radio frequency, used the term uncooperative vagrant to describe a decorated veteran, a fact my office has already logged. He turned his head slightly, his gaze falling on Jada. The cold, official mask dropped for a fraction of a second, replaced by a look of profound respect and genuine concern. "Jada," he said, his voice softening. "Are you all right?" The use of her first name, the deference in his tone, was a thunderclap in the silent diner. It recontextualized everything. Miller's jaw literally dropped. Carter looked like he was about to be sick. This wasn't some random woman they were harassing. This was someone else. Jada gave a slow, single nod. "I'm fine, Elias." A little disappointed, but fine. Vance nodded, his professional demeanor snapping back into place as he turned back to the officers. "I'm going to need both of your badge numbers and the name of your supervising officer. Now. With all due respect, sir." Carter began, his voice trembling. "Respect is not what you demonstrated here today, Officer Carter," Vance cut him off sharply. "What you demonstrated was, at best, a catastrophic failure in judgment, and at worst, a malicious and targeted violation of a citizen's constitutional rights under color of authority. Now, your badge numbers." Slowly, his hands shaking, Carter recited his number. Miller hesitated for a moment, his pride still warring with the reality of his situation. Vance's eyes narrowed. "Do not make me ask again, Officer Miller." Defeated, Miller mumbled his badge number. Vance didn't write them down. He just nodded, as if committing them to a flawless memory. "You will both return to your precinct. You will file a full report of this incident. Be aware that my office will be subpoenaing that report, along with your body camera footage, which I trust," he paused, letting the words hang in the air, "is fully functional and was active for the entire duration of this interaction." Miller and Carter just stared, trapped. "Good," Vance said. He then addressed the entire diner. "On behalf of the United States Department of Justice, I apologize for this disruption. I want to thank those of you who stood up for a fellow citizen. Your actions have been noted." He looked back at the two officers, his voice dropping to an icy, final command. "Leave. Now." Without another word, stripped of all their bluster and authority, Miller and Carter turned and walked out of the diner. The bell above the door jingled softly, a pathetic sound in the wake of their humiliating exit. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the entire diner took a collective breath, and the heavy, oppressive weight in the air finally lifted. Part 5, The Ripples of Truth. In the immediate aftermath of the officer's departure, a strange, buzzing energy filled the diner. The patrons lowered their phones, exchanging looks of disbelief and dazed relief. Maria leaned against the counter, pressing a hand to her chest, while Chloe slowly began to pour coffee for customers who hadn't even realized their cups were empty. Elias Vance remained standing by Jada's table, his phone already in his hand. A notification chimed. He glanced down, a wry expression on his face. "Well," he said, almost to himself. The wheels of digital justice turned swiftly. He turned the screen toward Jada. It was a Twitter link to a video, already posted by a local Baltimore news aggregator. The thumbnail was a still image of Officer Miller leaning aggressively over Jada's table. The headline read, "Tense standoff at Harborview Diner as cops confront woman. Who is she?" The view count was already climbing into the thousands. "That's us," Chloe whispered, peering over Jada's shoulder. "That's, right now. The internet abhors a vacuum, especially one that looks like injustice," Vance commented dryly. Jada watched the silent, looping video on the screen for a moment. She saw herself, a pillar of calm, and the escalating aggression of the officers. She saw the fear in Chloe's eyes and the dawning courage on the faces of her fellow diners. "I didn't ask for any of this," she said quietly, her voice tinged with a weariness that went bone deep. "You never do," Vance replied gently. "They chose you, Jada. They made you the headline." Over the next few hours, as the video exploded across social media platforms, the question in the headline, "Who is she?" became an obsession. The story was no longer just about two cops overstepping their bounds. It was a mystery. Who was this quiet, dignified black woman who could summon a DOJ official with a single touch of a button? The internet, with its crowdsourced investigative power, began to provide answers. It started with a reply to the original tweet from a user named @LegalEagle78. That looks like Jada Washington. If it is, those cops are in a world of trouble. That tweet opened the floodgates. A screenshot surfaced of an old Department of Justice website from the early 2010s. It was an archived press release about the successful reform of a notoriously corrupt police department in a southern state. Listed as lead investigator for the DOJ's Special Litigation Section was the name, Jada Washington. Then came the personal testimonials. A prominent civil rights attorney in Chicago tweeted, "I was a junior lawyer at the DOJ when Jada Washington was my boss. She was known as the Ghost. She'd dismantle entire systems of corruption without ever seeking the spotlight. She taught me that true power isn't loud, it's relentless. Standing with you today, Jada." A retired FBI agent posted a photo on Facebook. It showed a group of serious-looking people in suits, standing outside a federal courthouse. In the center was a younger Jada, looking just as composed then as she did in the diner. The caption read, "This was after the T-Rex case." Jada Washington was the architect of the entire investigation. She took on a criminal syndicate that had half the city's police force on its payroll and won. She's a living legend. Someone else unearthed a grainy photo from even further back. A young woman in army fatigues, her face determined, receiving a medal in a dusty, sun-bleached landscape that was clearly Afghanistan. The accompanying article mentioned Captain Jada Washington of the 101st Airborne's Intelligence Unit, commended for exceptional courage and analytical prowess under fire. Piece by piece, the puzzle of the quiet woman in the diner was assembled for the world to see. She wasn't a victim. She wasn't just a veteran. She was a lifelong warrior who had fought for her country overseas and then had come home to fight for its soul from within the halls of power. She had spent her career holding men exactly like Officer Miller accountable. She had literally written sections of the police reform manuals that departments across the country were supposed to use as their guide. The narrative had shifted completely. This wasn't a story about a potential victim being saved. It was the story of a sleeping giant being prodded, a quiet titan who, just by sitting still, had reminded the world that the deepest strength often resides in the most unassuming vessels. Part 6, The Aftermath and Echoes. 1 week later, on a crisp Monday morning, the bell above the door of the Harborview Diner jingled. Jada Washington walked in. She wore the same black jacket, her posture just as erect, her gaze just as calm. But this time, everything was different. As she entered, conversations didn't just dip, they stopped. Every eye in the room turned to her. But it wasn't the hostile stare of Officer Miller, it was a look of quiet, profound respect. The construction worker from the week before gave her a solemn nod. The teacher who had stood up for her smiled warmly. Maria, behind the counter, simply pointed to Jada's usual booth. It was waiting for her, clean and empty. But Jada didn't go directly to her seat. She stopped in the middle of the room, her eyes moving slowly, meeting the gazes of the people who had, a week ago, been strangers. The room was so quiet you could hear the gentle lapping of the harbor water against the pilings outside. "Good morning," she began, her voice not loud, but clear and resonant. "I didn't come here last week looking for trouble. I just wanted breakfast. Some of you knew me, most of you didn't. That's how I prefer it. I don't believe anyone should need a resume to be treated with basic human decency." She paused, letting the words sink in. What happened here wasn't just about me. It was about a dangerous idea, the idea that you can judge a person's worth by their appearance, or that respect is something to be earned through confrontation rather than given freely as a right. Her eyes found Maria, then Chloe, and she gave them a look of deep gratitude. "I served this country in uniform. I served it in a suit. I believed I had earned the right to sit in peace. But the world we want is not yet the world we have. And so, sometimes, we have to stand up. Or, as it turns out, just sit. And trust that the truth, and the good people around us, will do the talking. A few people were misty-eyed. Maria wiped her hands on her apron, her movements slow and deliberate. I'm not a hero, Jada concluded. I'm a citizen. A neighbor. Just like all of you. All I ask is that the next time you see someone sitting alone, you remember that. You don't know the battles they've fought. Just know they deserve their peace. And with that, she turned, slid into her booth, and finally sat down. There was no applause, just a thick, profound silence filled with understanding. Chloe brought her the usual, hash browns, rye toast, black coffee, and when she set the plate down, her voice was steady. Welcome back, Jada. The incident at the Harborview Diner became a catalyst. The city's police department, under intense public and federal pressure, announced a full, independent review of its stop and question policies, with Officer Miller and Officer Carter placed on administrative leave pending the results of the DOJ investigation. A local veteran support group, after its director cited Jada's story in an interview, received an unprecedented surge in donations, enough to secure permanent housing for 24 homeless veterans. A formal letter arrived for Jada, hand-delivered by Elias Vance. It was an offer to serve as a civilian advisor on a new national task force for police accountability and community trust. She accepted, on one condition: her work would be uncompensated, and her involvement would not be used for publicity. This isn't about me, she told him. It's about the work. But she also told him her Mondays at the diner were non-negotiable. The biggest change, however, was in the small, ordinary moments. People in the diner talked to each other more. They held the door for one another. They looked each other in the eye. One rainy morning, weeks later, a young black man, soaked and looking lost, wandered into the diner. He clutched a thin resume folder and looked like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. He hesitated, unsure where to go, until he saw Jada in her booth, quietly sipping her coffee. He approached timidly. "Excuse me, ma'am," he mumbled. "Mind if I just sit for a minute? Try to get my head straight." Jada looked up, her expression soft. She nodded once and slid the extra menu across the table. "Take all the time you need, son," she said. "Coffee's on me." They didn't talk much more, but they didn't need to. In the quiet warmth of the diner, a space was being held, a space of dignity without title, of strength without noise. Jada's story reminds us that respect should never be a battle to be won, it should be a courtesy freely given. When you see someone sitting quietly, don't assume they are insignificant. They might just be holding the line for the rest of us. Jada's story is a powerful testament to quiet strength and collective courage. Have you ever witnessed an act of silent heroism, or seen a community come together in an unexpected way? Share your story in the comments. We believe in the power of shared experiences, so please, comment with respect. And if this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, so you never miss another story that matters.